But let's talk about the fun stuff, shall we? Let's talk about the thing on everyone's mind. So, how's it going, Raiders? I guess some stuff happened the past couple of days. I've mentioned a billion times that I've skipped this tier. I just can't do Party Finder like that. I get so burned out of it not having a static. So I've skipped this tier, just been casually playing and enjoying my time. But obviously, I'm in a big FF14 Discord. I've seen the news. You can't miss it on Twitter. It's time to talk about mods again. It's, here we go. How many rounds has this been? How many times have we talked about this, both on stream and just as a community? It feels like it comes up either at the end of every Savage tier, at the end of every Ultimate at this point. And yeah, we're back at it. But this time Yoshi came in and said a few things. He's a very disappointed dad right now, and I can't really blame him. So I've had my stance on this plenty of times on the channel that I'm absolutely unequivocally anti gameplay mods. Always have been, always will be. I was like that in WoW as well, right? In WoW, I did not even use weak ores until Mythic Gorefiend. Like I did all of HFC up until Mythic Gorefiend, and that's finally what made me install weak ores, and we didn't play much longer after that. After that's kind of when my group kind of fizzled out, and I got kind of sick of beating my head against that wall. Right? I think I had a weak ores for my roll the bones just to see the timers of it a little bit bigger. I could do it without it. Yeah, look up at the debuff at the buff bar. But it was just like a little quality of life one. And that was my only weak ores. I did not have any big time weak ores through almost the entirety of HFC. And I don't think I really had any weak ores at the beginning of BFA either. I didn't do too much raiding in BFA, but once I started it again and got into another group, we started fresh. And yeah, I had my roll the bones one and got rid of most of the weak ores stuff. I despise mods. I despise mods. Now it needs to be said that there is a difference in mods. Like there is so much whataboutism going on in the community with the pro mod teams and the anti mod teams, right? There's always like, well, what about ACT? What about this? What about this? I think there is a very, very clear difference between the kind of mods that most people are talking about and the kind of mods Yoshi's talking about that are just very blatant gameplay mods. Stuff like UAV mods, that kind of thing. UAV mods, things that put markers down that show you where AoEs would be that you would not normally see, those kind of things, right? I think there's a very clear difference between that and basically a calculator mod that that just shows you the damage on a nice little spreadsheet, right? So, yeah, I don't think Yoshi is in the wrong on calling out this action, calling out and not acknowledging the team that got the world first. And it seems like the team that got the world first is already doing their things to apologize for it. I guess one person that wasn't even part of the raid team but was part of the P8S team like said he would delete his character. So I mean, I don't know if you need to go that far, but yeah, so I'm firmly on the anti-mod stance. All right. Now, one of the big things that I always see is people saying, it's just doing things that that make it a little bit easier for callouts or doing things you would already do anyways. It's just automating it. And I think the best response to that would be that Folding Ideas video not too long ago, because they made the point, and this is the point that I have kind of made a few times on the channel, right? that anything that automates, anything that takes off that mental capacity, anything that takes a little burden off of that mental capacity that you have at any given time, that is a cheat. You're doing it in a way that is making it easier for you. It doesn't matter if it's automating it. It doesn't matter if it's doing something you would normally do anyway. If it makes it one less thing that you have to think about, then congratulations, it does make it a cheat. It does make it easier for you. You can try and justify it however you want, but that's the truth of the matter. I think one of the big things with this, more than anything else, is that esports and gaming, even though we kind of know that they've been around a while as just like a professional field, it's still relatively new in the grand scheme of things, right? It's still fairly young. There's been esports, especially in like fighting games and whatnot, for a very, very long time. But it's never been like the business that it is right now until fairly recently. And I think one of the big things with it is the accessibility of it kind of makes people think that there's kind of a blurred line a little bit, right? So, you know, because anyone can download a mod, because you're just sitting here at the keyboard or with your controller just playing a thing, like anyone can do it, right? So it does make it feel like there's some kind of blurred line involved. Oh God, here we go. Okay, it begins. It begins. This is gonna be the jump of this portion, isn't it? Oh, okay, this is fine. It's okay because it's more time to rant, which is what I wanted to do anyways. Right? So I think, especially in the field of gaming, part of it's the accessibility, and part of it's because a lot of it is kind of counterculture, right? So a lot of gamers, and I don't mean to generalize, but I think, it doesn't apply to everyone, but I think a lot of gamers are always kind of counterculture, right? And they don't always do a lot of the things or like a lot of the things that is popular among most people, right? Like that's why we became gamers, right? Like we're able to build our community of like-minded, awkward folks that don't really associate well with normal society in some ways, right? I think that that's not always the case nowadays. Now that gaming is such a big business and is such a big field now. But I think in general, among the more hardcore types in the community, I think that is kind of the case. And the point that I'm making with this is like a lot of the people that run a lot of the esports, a lot of people who are really into esports and video game culture and whatnot, I think a lot of this mod talk is because a lot of them have not watched real sports. I guess I shouldn't say real sports because I think at this point esports can be kind of defined as a real sport too. But they don't like human sports. They don't watch flesh sports. They don't watch that. American football and the Super Bowl is. I would have people on Worm Rest Accord when I played WoW. Anytime you mention real sports, they were like, "Ew, what's that?" Like that was literally like the response, like, "Ew, I don't pay attention to that shit," right? But it's important in the context of this because when it comes to these world first races and it comes to esports and turning rating into like an actual legitimate sport or something like that, even if it's just for charity donations or something like that, you can't complain about a lot of these things and complain about what's happening in the industry right now if you're not paying attention to real sports. You cannot treat the world first race and a high end rating as a sport and as an esport, and then get mad when the owners of the sport start calling you out and start enforcing the rules of their game. And this is something that people who watch those flesh sports have known for a very, very, very long time. It is standard practice, right? The kind of issue we're having with mods now, it really does remind me of the issue that we had in baseball back in the 90s. Maybe that makes me less of a gamer. I don't know. Ooh, he's a normie. And because of that, like it kind of gives me some context to what all is going on right now in talks with modding. In the end of the 90s, there was the steroid scandal, and that was a big deal. That was a massive deal to not just baseball, but I think sports in general. How big of a deal that was. I don't know if a lot of my viewers like remember that. Like during the Mark McGuire home run race, like that essentially saved the sport for a long time, right? Like that got people interested again after several dead years, and kind of revitalized things. And then the steroid scandal came out. I mean, there were congressional hearings on it. It was not a small situation whatsoever. And sure enough, I mean, that kind of changed how baseball does things and how sports in general does things. Nowadays it's still a big deal during the Olympics. There was the Russian skater that was caught, um, that tested positive. And, that became a big thing because, it was her coach that was doing it, and she didn't really know any better. She was only, what, 14, 16, something like that. It's still a major issue when you're caught doping in sports. And to me, that is kind of the same situation as modding, and the modding discussion and what it means to cheat and that kind of thing. And I firmly believe in what Yoshi P was saying. It's like if you were truly good at this game, if you were truly the person and the gamer that you said you are, then why would you need these mods? And it's the same way in actual sports. You want to know how you get good and make it to the major leagues in baseball? You have a lot of talent. That's how you make the major leagues. You become really good at the game, and you do it better than anyone else in your position, right? Like that's how you do it. You don't need to cheat. You do it a legitimate way. Now there's always discussions of as far as like what constitutes cheating. That's not something that ever escapes any kind of competitive field, right? When they first introduced elbow guards into baseball, that was a big deal. It's like, oh well, now players aren't going to have to switch up as much to try and dodge balls. They'll get hit more, and then they get a free base, right? That was a big thing. Nowadays, it's not as big of a deal. I think most people understands for the protection of the players, right? Um, especially with everything going on in football and whatnot going on. Like, I don't think anyone's going to argue against protecting players more, but it was still it was a discussion, and it still is a discussion in certain circles of baseball, certain very old school circles of baseball, right? So I mean, that's never going to go away. Just like in modding, just like in Final Fantasy, there's always questions about what constitutes a mod. Does ACT count as a mod? Does Discord count as a mod? Does a ninth person count as a mod if they're spectating and kind of coaching the team? That's it's never going to be in a black and white situation. It's not ever going to be an all-in-one thing. Even with the terms of service saying it is, in terms of intellectual discussion within the community or whatever, just like a real sport, there are always going to be debates about this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it is Square Enix's game. Just like Major League Baseball determines the rules of Major League Baseball, and just like the NFL determines the rules of the NFL. And if they determine that something is cheating, it is absolutely ridiculous to say, oh, well, every other team is doing it, so we should do it too. And just let it become standard practice. Like it's such a unique thing in the gaming sphere. It really truly is. When in other sports, it's not really a question at all. It's like, oh, they got caught cheating. Now they're going to get, punished for it. A few years ago, the Astros got caught cheating in the lead up to the World Series. And, there's always going to be people looking for a competitive advantage. There always will be. That's not going to go away. It's just the nature of competition, right? I mean, they were literally banging on trash cans to tip pitches to whoever was batting at the time, right? Like that's how far they went. But you know what? They got caught, and it became a very, very big deal. And there are still a lot of people, both fans and players, that believe that they did not get punished nearly hard enough for what happened, because they ended up winning the World Series that year, right? And it calls kind of everything that they were doing that season into question, everything they were doing in the World Series into question, right? So yes, there's always going to be a competitive advantage, but you know what? The reason that they get punished for this stuff is because the majority of players and the majority of people believe in the integrity of the game. And beyond that, there's enough oversight to try and keep it from happening, right? Like, genuinely, you can watch a game, be it soccer, be it football, be it baseball, and you go in with the expectation that everyone is playing equally. And yeah, there's always going to be little tricks here and there. There always will be. But genuinely, it's more in the context of people, kind of outsmarting the other players, right? Versus outright cheating. Like, if a pitcher is tipping pitches and the other team figures it out, so that the runner on second has little call signs to tell his batter what's going on. Like, that's just outsmarting the pitcher, right? But when you start banging on trash cans and using video footage to do that, well, that's starting to cross the line a little bit now, isn't it? And it's kind of the same thing when it comes to modding in Final Fantasy, I think. People want this to be like a strict black and white situation, and they want to say, well, all these whataboutisms about, well, what about this? What about this? And to me, that's just saying, I don't want to take responsibility for getting caught. I don't want to take responsibility for cheating. You got caught cheating. Own it. And don't be surprised and don't get mad when the owners of the game actually enforce their rules. Like, that's what it comes down to. Because believe it or not, I believe that the majority of players do not use a lot of those mods. I think there is probably more than you would think, but I don't think it's nearly as big as some people want to believe. I think it is very much something that seems very unique to the World First race, because, and I've had my opinions about a lot of the people doing the World First stuff and streaming a lot of the World First stuff, but again, I think it's because they are trying to turn it into an esport. They're trying to do it for clout. So they think there's all of these players using this competitive advantage when there's not, you know? And I am firmly on the side of Square, actually punishing a lot of these players and trying to tamp down on this culture of modding in the high-end raid scene. Because again, as kind of told in the Folding Ideas video, like, it does become a culture that becomes outside of the realm of what Square or any game company really officially wants, right? Like, even if a lot of these world first raiders are trying to put it in the context of, oh, well, this is world first, this is world first, this is something that's unique to us because no one else is playing at this level, right? That doesn't matter to a lot of their viewers. All their viewers are going to see is, oh, my favorite streamer did this, so this is what I need to do to play at their level. Because even though most players will never play at their level, everyone likes to think they can, right? It's the old Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Everyone wants to think that they can do that at that level. And it starts to trickle down from there. Oh, my favorite streamer did this, so I'm going to start doing it. And then those people start making Party Finder stuff. And then they start requiring mods in those Party Finder listings, right? And then going from there, oh, well, you can't put it in Party Finder listings or that can be reported. So they start asking you to go onto their Discord to join their team. And oh, well, Square can't do anything about a Discord call, right? So it starts to steamroll very, very quickly if action isn't taken. So I am firmly on the same side as Yoshi P with this, and I wish that they had actually enacted harder punishments. I wish they would have started enacting harder punishments earlier. You know, leading back to the old flesh sports. I mean, you look at doping in baseball, right? You know what happens if you get caught testing positive? Your first offense, your first offense is an 80 game suspension. That is half the season. That is half the season that a potentially very, very good player might be out and hurting their team. Even if they appeal it, they still can't play while the appeal is going on, right? I mean, that is massive. That is a very, very big deal if you were caught cheating in baseball. Now, you could probably make the argument of like, oh, well, a lot of people are cheating and people don't, and people just aren't caught. And I firmly believe that isn't the case. And do you know why? Because of how many people are watching, which is exactly what's happening right now is people think that they're doing all of this in secret without realizing how many eyes are on them, how many people within their own team are probably on them, which I guess is what happened with the Unnamed video. You know, is supposedly a burned ninth or 10th person that was promised or whatever. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, right? But yeah, these people are figuring out that like none of this stuff is done in secret. None of these things are ever completely in a bubble. And because of that, if you get cheat, you will more than likely get caught eventually. Even if everyone is super hush hush about it, more than likely all it's going to take is burning one person, and then all the truth comes to light. Because this isn't just, you know, a couple people in a LAN party, you know, playing video games together anymore, right? Like this is a big industry. There are a lot of people involved. There are a lot of people that watch the world first race. There are a lot of people that donate to Mog Talk for the charity aspect of it. None of this is done in secret, and because of that, it makes it very, very hard to cheat. So I think overall, you know, I think a lot of really esports minded people and a lot of people in FF specifically, but I think even on a broader field in terms of like video games in general, are just kind of going through growing pains and figuring out the lessons that a lot of these real sports learned a long, long time ago when it comes to trying to cheat the owners of the game. Really, I think that's what it comes down to. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. Like I said, I don't think Yoshi will enable like easy anti-cheat or anything like that. I don't think it's possible. There will always be paid mods that can get around it. It will narrow the field quite a bit in terms of, like I said, the culture around it and having that trickle down effect. But I think that's something he said multiple times he doesn't want to do. But obviously, he's going to stop acknowledging these races, which is really one of the only reasons to do it in the first place, right? And we'll see what happens from here. I think the last notice that he put out was, I mean, he wasn't subtle about it. Is saying if you guys are going to keep doing this, then we're just not going to make ultimates, because he said multiple times he wants a casual game that a lot of people can enjoy, right? So we'll see what happens from here. I think one thing that could potentially happen. Okay, here we go. Nope. So maybe if I stand at the very back and do a full jump, maybe that's what I need to do. You know, the other thing is like enabling a lot of those features like easy anti-cheat or anything like that. They're expensive. They're kind of a hassle. And I think that they just don't want to go through the hassle of it. Now, what could happen is, you know, if it keeps being an issue and it becomes a really big thing, what they could do, and that is more potentially viable, is they start issuing takedown notices to the sites that run a lot of these things. Like they could issue and legally do so a takedown notice to FF logs. And there would be literally nothing FF logs could do it other than spend a whole lot of money trying to fight it and more than likely lose, because you're not going to win against Square Enix's lawyers. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So yeah, if it becomes a big issue, you might see some DMCA notices going out. Again, it's one of those things that they probably want to avoid because that stuff gets really expensive very, very quickly. And The other thing is, I think they know how much of a community is built around the non-gameplay mods. But they know there's a big community around it, right? Like that's a major part of Twitter in certain circles. And if they started issuing takedown notices to, XIV mod archive or whatever, okay, well, that far, huh? Okay. I think they know that they would burn a lot of the community and they don't want to do that. I think they are trying to ride that fine line between, you know, making sure some things are not acceptable without burning the things that they really don't have an issue with. Like, I don't think they have an issue with, like, burning down the house, right? That's the mod that allows you to basically interact with housing furnishings to build a lot of those really cool houses and stuff you see on Twitter. It adds Z-axis and all kinds of stuff to it. And I think that's something that they've kind of acknowledged themselves in the past live letters is like, hey, some of these mods are on us. Like, these are gameplay features that we should be working on. And I think they understand that something like burning down the house kind of falls under that. Like, they know that they need to expand their housing features by quite a bit. And it could be something that we might see in 7.0. Who knows? We'll just have to see how they are moving along with the graphical update and some of the underworking systems and whatnot. So I think they understand that some of these mods are definitely because they have failed as developers on approaching some of these things. Like, no one's going to get mad at chat bubbles, right? I think if we do start seeing some more of these third-party mods added, like officially into the game, I think chat bubbles will probably be like the first one added in, right? Like no one really has an issue with chat bubbles, and I think it's probably like the most popular mod out there, right? So some of this stuff they understand. They understand why people are using this stuff. They're not going to get mad at people being horny on Twitter. Why would they? That's a big part of the community. But, they do have to draw the line somewhere, and they have to draw the line in a very, very big way, I think. Because at a certain point, it does start affecting gameplay, and it does start entering that esports aspect of it, and it does start blocking off parts of the game to other players. If you build your own nice little house, hey, that's fine. It's not affecting anyone. You get a nice little house, no one cares. But if it starts becoming one of those things where it's like you have to join a Discord to join this party finder group, and that starts becoming a regular thing, and it starts blocking players off because they don't have certain mods, yeah, that's a big thing. And they know, I think in a very, very big way, that it is because of the community around it, and it is because of that trickle down effect, right? And how things spread very, very quickly from one small thing into very, very big things. So yeah, they do have to put down their foot at some point or another. To me, if you need those cheats and you need those tools to be a world first raider, nah, you're not actually as good at the game as you thought. That's always been my stance, and it always will be my stance. Again, if you want to make it to the big leagues, just play well. Just play better than everyone else. That's what it comes down to. So yeah, that's my rant, and I rant about mods and a little bit of a discussion on Major League Baseball history, I guess. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. I think I think if esports and in this discussion keeps going on as it always has, I think you're really going to have to pay attention a lot more to what actual sports have done and how they've dealt with these things over the past several decades. Because I mean, they went through a lot of these growing pains too. In MLB, it was the spitball era, and football's had its own share of things. Every sport's done it, and in esports, world first rating, whatever your game of choice happens to be, it's just going through its era right now of doing this. But I think a lot of these gamers that are very pro mods and pro cheating, and believe that you have to have these mods to stay competitive. I think over the next, not necessarily next patch in terms of Final Fantasy, but I think over the next 10 years or so, just in gaming as a whole, I think you're going to see a lot of this stuff kind of come into light and be adjusted. And I think they're going to find out the hard way, that their the side of history typically does not fall with them if you're cheating. As it's really what it comes down to. We'll see if esports can grow. Yeah, a lot of it's going to determine where things go from here. Um, I think if we are going to have this discussion and bring the scene forward, a lot of it kind of falls on to how big esports grows just as a whole over the next 10 years. There's been a few sparks here and there with like Overwatch League and stuff, but it's still not quite the same. It's still not competing with the NFL. It's still not competing with MLB. Any of the other big five, I guess you could say. So it's really got to do some work to make it to that level. And I think this discussion and these things happening, for as hilarious as it can be, I've loved seeing the UAV memes, but as hilarious and oftentimes infuriating as having these discussions over and over has been, I think it is something that is kind of necessary if esports are going to grow, just on the whole, just as a sport, as an actual commodity. It's something that needs to be done. It's a discussion that has to be had. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what's going on from here. We'll see what happens with the OCP and if if there's going to be any other ultimates. I know they supposedly deleted the achievements and titles and weapons from Unnamed. So that's a pretty massive step. That's more than I've ever seen them do. But I think at the next step, if this keeps happening, I think you're going to start seeing some bans and some very long bans. Yeah, yeah. All I can say is, if you see people cheating, report it, even if it's on one of the world's worst first teams. If you're part of one of those teams and you don't like what's going on, you don't like the culture surrounding the mods, do what that guy did and put the video out. That's really all it comes down to. If you don't do it, eventually another team is, and yeah, you can see where the side of history falls for most of these sports, right? Thanks for listening to me rant. I hope I wasn't too mean about it or anything on stream, but I hate doing that. Again, I hate being that angry opinion guy. I try not to be, but it's been such a discussion that I've talked about it so many times on stream that I feel like it's really easy for me to go on a big rant without exactly meaning to. So, it is what it is. But I've said my piece. Now it's in the past. Now we've got more sewers to look forward to. We're starting right. We're ending up right where we started again. So next stream it'll be like this one never happened.